Hello, happy Halloween. No worries, just me. It's not really a werewolf. Sorry, it's a little bit later than usual this evening, guys. Happy Halloween. So tonight we're going to be covering some of the political game playing that you're able to see and witness in social and in business contexts and environments. So last week we covered power and politics in the workplace and in social environments and the different aspects and perceptions of power and control. And so we covered what power and control are, the different forms of it, how to navigate through owl, fox, donkey, or sheep, and to be an aspiring eagle, and don't be messing about with the egos. So we're going to cover some specific games, as I promised, that you'll probably recognise in your own workplace or in your own social context. Because what we covered last week is there's a lot of perception involved in power and politics and control, and usually it's the perception of the power or control being exercised that makes it so effective. So we covered things like legitimate power. We covered coercive power, we covered expert power, and we covered power involving trust and things like that as well. So let's dive straight in. This should be a really quick Halloween edition of the games. I've pulled out 13 of these for you to have a look at and be able to recognise them in your own business, in your own social context. And again, one thing that's really important is to recognise the organisational or the operational context as well, to see where the games are being played, because they are being played. Again, we covered last week, it's normal for these things to be played, for these games to be played, power and politics and control in the workplace and in social environments. It's normal. Human beings behave in that kind of way, as long as they're acting with integrity. And as long as they're behaving in an innocent kind of way, then they're not playing psychological games where they begin to not act with integrity. And so, for example, we're going to cover the first game, so to speak, which is insurgency games. You know, in the workplace, sometimes when people are perceived to be of a lower status or a lower end of the hierarchy, they engage in political game playing to challenge the dominance of a high-ranking person. And you'll see these patterns of behaviour in meeting rooms, for example. So when someone who's originally perceived not to be of the same status or hierarchy as the person perhaps leading the meeting, but there's a power struggle in some regard. And again, these things are very normal, and there'll be an exchange. So the first one is an insurgency game. So good exchange is when two people or two groups of people haven't met, and one has a perception that someone may not be in the role that they originally thought them to be, or someone may, again, if there's any ignorance or arrogance involved, they may perceive someone's character or demographic to be their disadvantage, and there could be an insurgency game played with a person who's perceived to be of a lower status or hierarchy to start advancing in terms of an exchange. And so these things can happen often by subverting or undermining the authority or the perceived authority in the room, in the organisational context. And then there's an exchange of perhaps legitimate power to intervene, or there's an exchange of expert power to earn respect. And then you're starting to see the exchange of the common ground. So then the insurgence is over. But these games are played all the time. Even when you meet someone for the first time, there may be very subtle insurgency games being played. to kind of weigh the other person up. Well, this is where your own emotional intelligence and your own perception will come into play, to see whether two people need to kind of work it out, whether you may be perceived to be the authoritative figure in different aspects, whether it's legitimate power, whether it's expert power, whether you have a level of trust with one or two of the people and you're able to, a group of people, and you're able to be the authoritative figure to stop the insurgents. So if there's an insurgency game, then there's sometimes a counter-insurgency game. Like I've just described. So where someone is perceived to have some form of dominance, whether it's a CEO, he, she, or they will have legitimate power. They might have expert power as well. They might have the trust of the people, and to be able to work with different perceived to be levels in the organisation. So if there is a clear hierarchy, if, for example, you're communicating to the whole business, then you might not want to play a counterinsurgents game, but you will want to be able to communicate in such a way that everyone in the room or everyone in the business organizational context, operational context, again, receive the same message, and it's communicated in the same consistent in terms of messaging, tone, and everything else. But a counterinsurgency game is when in the workplace, again, if sometimes it can't always be acted with integrity, because someone who's at the top of the hierarchy does have legitimate power if there is a hierarchical organization in the workplace. It could be, again, in a social context as well. So you might have, the matriarch of the family. You might have the figurehead of the social context or the social occasion, and they're able to maneuver and gain and maintain support and favour of the other people within the groups. And what happens there is that they're able to try and change the insurgents that are playing the insurgency games. And so you'll see these in organisational contexts and social contexts as well. It's the counterinsurgency games where, again, perceived to be dominant, will employ tactics to thwart or neutralise the efforts of the insurgents. So, if you see two people arguing, or if there's a power struggle within a meeting and that you don't see an end to it and you need to move on, then a counterinsurgency tactic or game will be to say, take it offline, for example, very quickly, and so on and so forth. There's also, this is very politically correct, sponsorship games. Okay, sponsorship games. If it was to be non-PC, it could be termed as bribery. It could be termed as beguiling behaviour. But, for example, patrons and their clients engage in some form of political manoeuvring to gain and maintain support from each other. And what happens is the patrons sometimes provide some resources or opportunities to their clients in order for them to exchange in loyalty of service. So that's not legal speak. It's another way of saying that the sponsorship games is, if you help me, I'll help you. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And again, these are very, very normal things to do. Take a client out for a meal. If you want to work with someone, or you know that you need to be friends with someone because your best friend has entered a new friendship circle, and you, for example, so it's a good way and a very genuine way, and you're acting with integrity to play a sponsorship game. And so again, these are normal. So that's a sponsorship game. Then there's alliance building. So some of these may be obvious, but once you're able to put a name to it, it triggers in your mind, and it develops your own emotional intelligence to recognize the organizational and operational context to see, okay, they're alliance building, or sure, you should invite them out for dinner, or well, it's fine for those two to, I can recognize what's going on here. And they're just kind of first time they've met, they're just working each other out. And if you're the senior figure or perceived to be the senior figure, then you might need to intervene. But it's all about recognizing when these things are happening and seeing that they're normal, seeing when to intervene and when you don't really need to, but also recognizing different cultures and how sometimes cultures can clash, and recognizing the different games that can be played. So alliance building. Surrounding yourself with advocates when you want to move something forward can be similar to sponsorship games as well. So if you want to gain an alliance with a certain crowd of people or an operation or a team, then it's important to surround yourself with advocates. And also, in some cases, to form an alliance, you're able to surround yourself with people who will maybe be critical towards you as well. So you know exactly what's next. You're getting all of the feedback that you need in that regard. So peers in the organisation are able to form internal alliances to get things done. And you'll see that alliance building happens all the time, very similar to networking, very similar to people who will be able to take a group of people in order to get something done collectively as well. So people forming alliances, again, it's normal. And the alliance builders could create an insurgency tactic or game, which may need a counter-insurgency, which may need some form of sponsorship in order to gain trust and relationships. And it doesn't always need to be something that's material, for example. These are just examples as to how these games are played. Then, following on from alliance building, you've got empire building. So empire building, again, as long as you're acting with integrity, in these scenarios, a particular individual usually can be perceived as an empire builder. And what happens is when they're forming alliances, they're able to bring those alliances together. And also when they put in place some form of subsystem that allows them to be the person at the top of their own empire, then you're able to see that, maybe using their specialized knowledge as well, if they've got expert power, you're able to see that they're starting to build an empire. And that doesn't necessarily mean at scale either. You could collect all of the experts in a certain organization, and maybe 5 people will then have a small empire that's able to have expert power and perhaps perceived to be legitimate power over an organization and within a certain type of culture as well. So it seeks to expand their influences through their alliances, and perhaps, again, a mix of sponsorship games, counterinsurgency, and insurgency to build their alliances and ultimately build their empire. And then expanding on their influence and control, knowing if someone was to depart from their alliance or from the empire, where the next alliance is going to be formed. So again, that can be quite a good skill to be able to build an empire. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be on a conquest or on a crusade or anything like that. But if you need to get something done very, very quickly, I've personally built expert networks across lots of different countries, around 50 people, 50 different experts across the world. So we had them from the US to Australia, and that could be perceived as an empire because we had 50 people that when some of the biggest businesses in the world said, we need this done. It was energy, for example. We needed to nail some specific requirements that related to energy for a certain client. And all we did was we set up a virtual meeting of our little expert energy empire, and we were able to put in place a global program of energy initiatives that saved the client millions. So that's how you can form alliances, build an empire, and be able to act with integrity to deliver value greater than the sum of its parts. Then you can have budgeting games. So we talked about budgeting games in the last Power and Politics Live. It's basically people who have control over resources. So budgeting games. So people who are able to hold back and who have the budget. Again, acting with integrity, if they're the decision maker that has the budget, and if they engage in sort of strategies and strategic games to acquire resources or budget allocations, for example, then they do have some form of legitimate power and they have control over the resources that you need. So again, control over resources, you've got expertise games. Repeat myself again, acting with integrity, no problem. Psychological game playing and politically aware, then, you know, that's probably time for perhaps an intervention. But expertise games, people who can leverage their own knowledge and expertise to be able to have some form of legitimate power and obviously control to be able to maneuver and move resources effectively. So that can be people, it can be tangible items such as operations, products, things like that, operational efficiency, you know, all of these things that make businesses tick. Banking, corporate finance executives, CFOs, CTOs have expertise and are able to demonstrate their expertise. Bill Gates is an awesome example of expertise. Not game playing, but expertise, power, and legitimate power, and is able to play a game with people who go to pitch to him, in that he ensures that he has as much, if not more, knowledge as the expert that is coming to pitch to him. And that's a fact. If you watch The Brain of Bill Gates on Netflix, you'll be able to see how he maintains expertise, power, and control, and plays expertise games with integrity. So there's also, perhaps not acting with integrity, there's lauding games. Lauding. So when someone maybe has legitimate power, and it's perceived that they have legitimate power, that they laud it over the people who they perceive to be of a lower level within the hierarchy. So you'll see this happen as well. Hopefully not too much, but it does happen where lauding games are people kind of perhaps showing off. So with limited power or authority, but they have some sort of legitimate power as well, that they start lauding it over the organisation, and sometimes in social contexts too. A good way of acting with integrity is showing everyone your holiday snaps. So, you know, you've got some form of legitimate power. You know, you've just been on holiday. You may have been somewhere where no one has ever been before, and then you get a chance to lord it over people. But again, within reason and with integrity, all good fun. Then you've got yes, line and people games. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. four more, just so I don't forget. Line and people games. So line and people games, both people, this is more of an organizational game playing that you may see if you're managers or if you have managers and you're their direct line report. Sometimes they misuse their legitimate power in competitive and often unethical ways. So it's essentially the people who are trying to gain alliance and who may be forming some form of insurgency game up the line of command, up the chain of command. And you might see in some organization or even some small social context is how people at the same level will maybe get competitive. So this one is more about competition that's at the same level. That's why it's called line people games. So it's a straight line. Good way of seeing this is I've got kids, and there's, for example, there's myself and my wife, and then there's the two children who both on reporting to us. There's a straight line. And these two have some form of rivalry. Now, I'm not saying that obviously people who are at work or adults who are in a social context are children, but there is a parent and child relationship in some cases where the line manager is the parent and the line report is the child. And it's more again around the perception of authority, legitimate power, and in some cases expertise power. But if there is a level of equality, it's very healthy within a team. However, if there is some form of alliance or sponsorship, perhaps, to the line manager, then that can be perceived as line or people game playing. Is that they start to form some form of competitive rivalry, and the acting with integrity doesn't come into the question, into the argument. And this is where the foxes are in some cases. So if you go back to owl, fox, donkey, and sheep, so you've got acting with integrity and psychological game playing, and then you've got politically aware and politically unaware. So someone, so the owl is here, sheep is here, donkey is here, and the fox is here. So the foxes come out in some cases when they fight with each other. Rarely see owls fight with each other, but foxes in organizational and professional context, they'll fight with each other. But it takes an owl to have the counterinsurgency game to intervene and make an intervention, and that's what line and people games are. And you can see them happening, but knowing that again these things are normal, and understanding individually as a team how your team ticks and how the organization moves and changes form and shape and the cultural aspect and socio-cultural aspects as well in terms of demographic, perceived class, age, backgrounds, experience. It's quite an important mix of human beings. And so in being able to leverage your own emotional intelligence to recognize some of these games, you're able to act and deal with them much easier. So here, usually an insurgency or some form of intervention from an owl to separate the two foxes is how that one works. So then, rival camps. Rival camps is a good one. Okay, so rival camps these initially start as alliance building or empire building games. And this is what I was alluding to before, is when an empire builder creates a group of alliances, but some of the alliances don't get on, and they form almost a silo. So they put the little ring around their camp. So you've got the empire builder, perhaps it's no connection there, but perhaps lording it over the rest of the alliances. But then you've got different alliances that are all formed. But, for example, if this alliance moves away for some reason, then these two may form their own alliance. This one might be separated, which leaves this one out, caught in the middle in some cases. So that's when especially when you're managing multiple teams, when you bring multiple teams together as well, being able to understand the different intercultural aspects that you might want to try and foresee to ensure you don't get rival camps, unless you kind of set it up that way. So sometimes you can have things like power battles within an organization, and that sets up a mastermind and groups that can go and huddle, that can go and form and create new innovative ideas, and it's a competition to come up with the best ideas quickly. It's quite a healthy way of having some form of healthy competitive rivalry within teams and organizations. But rival camps, it's when there's confrontations between alliances and being able to, again, recognize, number one, it's normal. It's not 100% guaranteed that it's always going to happen. However, it's not 100% guaranteed that everyone's going to get on all of the time. And that's when rival camps can form. Again, in my opinion, it takes an owl to oversee the camp. A fox can be in and around the camp and maybe playing some of the games themselves. The donkeys and the sheep, they're in the camp, but they're not necessarily, the donkeys maybe hee-hawing a little bit, but the sheep is happy being the sheep, acting with integrity, not politically aware, but innocent in their behaviours. So rival camps is a good one when there's multiple groups of people, and you can have it in a social context when it's generational. I see where there's probably a matriarch at the top. So the grandparents, for example, let's have a few children. The children have had their own children, and then there's different forms of alliances that happen naturally from parent to child, and then bringing them all together for like maybe a Thanksgiving or for Christmas, and you want everyone to get along 100% of the time. The rival camps form. The same thing can happen when you bring two organizations together, when you bring two businesses together, when you organize a collection of businesses from other parts of the world, other parts of the country, to come together and work in sync. Rival camps can form. Okay. Candidate games, strategic candidate games. So this is quite a good one as well. We're getting a bit technical now. So those in power within the organisation, they engage in political manoeuvring. And what happens is it's to ensure that their preferred candidates succeed. Again, not necessarily acting with integrity, but this does happen. It's based on relationships, quality of relationships that is incredibly important in terms of power and politics. It is dependent on differences, which again makes it normal. Are people always acting with integrity by putting their champion candidates forward? That's something that we need to decide as leaders and as people with high emotional intelligence to recognise when candidate games are being played. And it does happen. It may be perceived that a specific candidate has legitimate power and has power of expertise, and therefore has an element of control over the candidate getting some form of position within the organisation or operation. However, if it's not perceived and not well received that the specific candidate that's being manoeuvred, so to speak, has legitimate or expert power, that's when you start to see the line of people games, competitive rivalry. If you get it really wrong, even in social contexts, in sports as well, if you're pushing a specific candidate to do a certain job, if, for example, a sports figure is picked in some form of draft in some of the sports, and they're not perceived to be as a high pick by the people, then you can start to see rival camps forming, etc., etc. So candidate games is another good one to see. Again, being the owl figure or the eagle figure, to be able to see that the candidates are being manoeuvred by the people with legitimate power or who have perceived legitimate power, and then manoeuvre them for their own benefit. So there's a judgment call to be made as to whether it's a legitimate expertise, perfect person to be moved, or is it more into the not acting with integrity and political psychological game playing kind of area? But candidate games do happen, and it's something to be aware of, and that's the whole point of this session today. Then there is whistleblowing games, which I think whistleblowing, can be quite a healthy thing. Knowing that whistleblowing is safe, knowing that it's not frowned upon, in my opinion, in certain organizational operational contexts, in professional environments, business environments, it stops things before they start. Knowing that knowing that you're not able to do something because it's perfectly safe and ordinary for someone to say that's not right, then it stops things before they start. But again, whistleblowing games, if you go back to acting with integrity and psychological game playing, you start to think of people blowing the whistle and maybe question whereabouts on the chart that they are in terms of their innocence and their political awareness. But all of these things, whistleblowing games, do have an impact and are interwoven within culture of social environments and operational organizational contexts and professional environments as well. And then the last one is called Young Turks Games. Now, it's got nothing to do with people coming from Turkey. In these scenarios, the existing organizational authority structure is perceived, but some form of a coup is orchestrated by a group of individuals known as Young Turks, and that's just the phrase that's used. They unseat the person at the top, and they are able to demonstrate some form of new leadership and hierarchy, and then it all falls into line, and it's often with different priorities and strategies. So this one's almost like a coup, but I've seen this scenario certainly in rival camps. So these guys form some form of a coup, and again, not like a military takeover or something like that. We're talking about business and social context, where the person who was originally the alliance builder and the empire builder loses their legitimacy of power because someone else has more expertise or someone else has more authority and perceived to have more legitimate power. And so coups can sometimes happen within organizations and in social contexts as well. But again, it's always the question around, is this happening, and are the people within the organization operational context acting with integrity, i.e. are they politically aware, and are they behaving in an innocent way? And are they politically aware and perhaps playing the psychological games? So they're the 13 games. I'm sure there's more, but these are the areas that you're able to look at in a social context or in a business context, recognizing operational organizational structure and context as well, where the levels and forms of power and control exist, and then how you're able to read the room essentially and leverage your own emotional intelligence to understand things like culture, again, power and control, how it's being exercised, which games are being played, is it okay, and is it not? And that's something that you have much more now in your toolkit to use for your next meeting or for your next social event or for your next leadership meeting where you bring lots of people together or build your own empire in order to deliver immense and massive value all over the world. Feel free to drop in a comment or a question. You can contact me through TheStrategySmith.com. This has gone out on LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, X, and Facebook. So all 5 of those that it's gone out. If you want to work with me, then there'll be a link for a free strategy call, discovery call with me in one of my bios. So feel free to drop in a 15-minute discovery call, and we can work with you in your business. We can work with you in your organization, motivate your teams, engage your teams, and then put in place, if you want, the growth diamond to deliver a strategic action plan to grow your business exponentially. I'll see you tomorrow, where we're covering the project management plan. So all of the tools within the project management office, I'm going to draw and detail out for you on this whiteboard. So you're able to see everything that you need, or you're able to ask someone to deliver for you to deliver a project in the project management office, in business change, construction, in anything that determines a project within your business and in your life. You need it in your life. Happy Halloween, and I will see you all tomorrow.